I don't know about you, but like Abram, that's exactly what I would need to trust in God's promise. Let's cut up some animals. Not birds, that's weird. But the animals, let's cut them in two. That'll give me confidence in his promises. Strange, isn't it? So strange. But to write off Abram and the people of old simply as strange would be kind of like going back to most women in this country in the 1980s and criticizing them for their big hair. That's just the way things were back then. And sure, provided shelter for migrating birds, but it was strange. In discussing animal sacrifices, Maimonides, a 12th century Jewish philosopher, suggested that the Israelites of Moses' day could not conceive of a form of worship that did not involve sacrifice. That was the norm in the ancient world. God is beyond time, but human beings live within time. In other words, we're conditioned by the time and the place in which we live. God accommodates himself to our worldview and gradually works to mature us. If that weren't the case, it would have been something like if God had sent Moses to Pharaoh saying, actually a better form of government is of the people, by the people, and for the people, right? That would have made no sense to Pharaoh or to anyone else at that time. The same is also true regarding slavery in the Bible, among many other things. God accommodates himself to our limitations in order to expand our humanity. You have to wonder if one day future generations will look back similarly on us. They used to kill their own children in the wombs of their mothers. Can you believe that? Maybe we're not quite as civilized or advanced as we like to think. Now, think about what's happening in our first reading. Animals are split in two. That means that this has something to do with death. There are forces, birds of prey, that seek to compromise or undermine what's happening. Abram, who will be the father of God's people, of those who believe, has a part to play in this. He's involved in this ritual. What is he doing? He's protecting its integrity, which might suggest something about the vocation of being a father, protecting the integrity of that which has been entrusted to you. Now, during the night, when darkness was all around, God, who is symbolized by smoke or cloud and fire or brightness, like during the Exodus and the Transfiguration, passes through the animals. He's passing through death. So what is God saying? If I'm unfaithful to the covenant I'm making with you, then let what has happened to those animals happen to me. God accepts the consequences of breaking the promise he made to Abraham and his offspring. Thus, a covenant is effected, like the covenant of holy matrimony, which, if it has the capacity to do anything, has the capacity to bring about change, transformation, transfiguration, like God's revelation has done with mankind and world history, and like the incarnation, death, and resurrection of Jesus has done in a categorically new way. That's the reality that all the laws and the prophets were pointing to, which represented in our gospel by Moses and Elijah. They were pointing, directing the Jews towards that, preparing them for that, to receive it. But notice how hard this was to understand and believe. Peter didn't know what he was saying, didn't know what to do. Listen to him, the voice said. You see, the key to understanding this is the Exodus, in which Israelites journeyed through the desert for 40 years, in which they lived in tents and were led by God, who was symbolized by a column of smoke or cloud, or a pillar of fire. It's a time in which he was especially close to them, helping them to arrive at the promised land. Every year since then, the Israelites celebrate the Feast of Booths, or tabernacles, or tents, calling to mind how God had been with them and looking forward to the time in which God would return once again and pitch his tent among us to deliver us and set all things right. But, the people, they had been faithful to God. They had broken the covenant and lost the land. That feast, boy, he was looking forward to the time in which God would return, pitch his tent among us, and deliver us. Friends, it was precisely within the context of that Feast of Tents that Jesus was transfigured. And then you can understand Peter's response. Lord, let's make 3 tents. What you had promised to do is happening now. Now we'll finally be able to throw off the Romans, reclaim our land, and begin a new geopolitical kingdom. It's no wonder that God said, man, listen to my son. You're missing the point. God himself was being faithful to the covenant from his side, and in Jesus, from our side. What was he preparing for? What did it say? His exodus. Jesus was preparing to pass through death to create something new for all of us. Listen to him, the voice said. Friends, one of the points that is proposed to us to consider is how we are meeting people where they are at in life, how we are accommodating ourselves to them, showing them, in a sense, the same grace that God has shown to us all our life long, meeting us in our misunderstanding and our limitations and our littleness of faith to mature us and to help us grow. Jesus can mature you and transfigure you too, if only you would allow him to break through your personal, societal, and cultural limitations and prejudices and do what you and the world need him to do to you. Bathe you in the brilliance of his divinity so you can obtain the full potential of your humanity.